My name is Jeannie, and I am 32 years old. As a senior marketing specialist at a software company, I poured my heart into building my career there. For 3 years, I thrived in a supportive environment, until Douglas became our new department head. Everything changed overnight. The day he threatened legal action against me in front of 20 colleagues should have destroyed me. Instead, it became the catalyst for his downfall. The confrontation lasted minutes, but the aftermath changed everything. If you are watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you are from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more workplace stories that might help you navigate your own career challenges. 4 years ago, I joined TechVision with butterflies in my stomach and stars in my eyes. Fresh from completing my marketing degree and a 2-year stint at a smaller agency, I was ready to take on bigger challenges. Walking into the gleaming glass building on my first day, I knew this was where I belonged. TechVision was everything I had hoped for in a workplace. The office buzzed with energy, people collaborated in open spaces, and creativity seemed to flow through the very walls. The company culture emphasized innovation and personal growth, with regular workshops, learning opportunities, and even a budget allocated for professional development courses of our choosing. My direct supervisor, Rachel, became more than just a boss to me. She was a true mentor who saw potential in me that I sometimes failed to recognize myself. Rachel had this remarkable ability to provide constructive feedback without ever making you feel inadequate. "Your ideas have wings, Jeannie. I am just helping you navigate which direction to fly," she would say with her characteristic warm smile. Under her guidance, my confidence grew alongside my skills. Within my first year, I spearheaded a digital marketing campaign for our flagship product TechFlow that exceeded conversion targets by 23%. The quarterly innovation award soon found its way to my desk, accompanied by an email from the CEO commending my fresh approach and exceptional execution. My team members quickly became friends. Margaret, our content strategist, had a gift for turning technical jargon into compelling narratives that customers could connect with. Brian handled our analytics with mathematical precision that bordered on artistry, always finding patterns and opportunities in data that others missed. Taylor, our graphic designer, could transform abstract concepts into visual masterpieces that captured attention and conveyed complex messages at a glance. Together, we formed a marketing quartet that harmonized beautifully. Lunch breaks often extended beyond their allotted time as we bounced ideas off each other, sometimes scribbling concepts on napkins that would later evolve into successful campaigns. We celebrated each win together, big or small, and supported each other through challenging projects. The camaraderie made even the most stressful deadlines manageable. My future at TechVision seemed boundless. During my performance reviews, Rachel consistently highlighted my potential for advancement. "Keep this trajectory, and you will be looking at a senior position within a few years," she assured me during my second-year evaluation. I worked harder than ever, driven by the possibility of growth and the genuine appreciation I felt from leadership. The company itself was growing rapidly, securing new clients and expanding into international markets. There was talk of opening offices in Europe, and I secretly hoped to be part of that expansion someday. My vision board at home featured images of London and Berlin, aspirational reminders of where my career might take me. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Rachel had been promoted to Vice President of Global Marketing Strategy, a role that would take her to the headquarters in another state. While we all celebrated her well-deserved advancement, a sense of uncertainty settled in our department. Who would replace her? Would they understand our team dynamic and preserve the culture Rachel had nurtured? "Change is coming," Margaret whispered to me during the goodbye party we threw for Rachel. "Let us hope it is for the better." I nodded, raising my glass to toast Rachel, unaware that the change about to unfold would test me in ways I never imagined. 2 weeks after Rachel left, we received an email announcing Douglas Wheeler as our new marketing director. His LinkedIn profile boasted an impressive career trajectory at Vertex Systems, our biggest competitor, where he had allegedly increased their market share by 30% in just 18 months. The announcement included a professional headshot of a stern-looking man in his 40s with piercing eyes and a tight-lipped smile that did not quite reach those eyes. On his first day, Douglas called a department-wide meeting. He arrived precisely 5 minutes early, dressed in an impeccable navy suit, his posture rigid as he stood at the front of the conference room, waiting for everyone to arrive. "Punctuality reflects commitment," were his first words as the clock struck 9. "I expect everyone to demonstrate that commitment going forward." He proceeded to outline his vision for the department using terms like aggressive growth performance metrics and accountability structures. Gone was the collaborative atmosphere Rachel had fostered. In its place, a hierarchy with Douglas firmly at the top. The changes came swiftly after that. Daily morning meetings at 8:30, detailed activity reports due every Friday, and new approval processes that added layers of bureaucracy to what had once been a nimble operation. Projects that previously moved forward through collaborative decision-making now stalled in Douglas's inbox, awaiting his final word. I adapted as best I could, setting my alarm an hour earlier and staying late to complete the additional paperwork. My to-do lists grew longer, but I was determined to prove myself to this new leader. Perhaps he simply had a different management style, I reasoned. Maybe once he saw our capabilities, he would loosen the reins. That hope diminished during the third morning meeting when I presented an idea for retargeting previous customers with personalized content based on their usage patterns. That approach is outdated. Douglas interrupted halfway through my explanation. We need innovative thinking, not recycled concepts. My cheeks burned as I returned to my seat. The presentation I had spent hours preparing dismissed without full consideration. Later that same meeting, Andrew from our sales liaison team suggested a remarkably similar approach framed slightly differently. Now that is the kind of forward thinking we need. Douglas nodded approvingly. Andrew fleshed that out and let us see a proposal by Monday. I exchanged glances with Margaret, whose raised eyebrow told me she had noticed the inconsistency too. But perhaps it was a fluke, I thought. Perhaps I had simply not articulated my idea clearly enough. As weeks passed, however, a pattern emerged. Douglas responded enthusiastically to suggestions from male team members, while subjecting ideas from female colleagues to intense scrutiny or outright dismissal. During one brainstorming session, he interrupted me 8 times but allowed Brian to speak uninterrupted for 15 minutes about a concept that was frankly half-baked. An uneasy feeling began to settle in my stomach. Was I being overly sensitive? Was there something lacking in my work that I failed to see? I reviewed my recent projects, finding no drop in quality or results. If anything, I was working harder than ever to meet the new standards. One evening, Margaret and I stayed late ostensibly to finish a competitive analysis report. Once everyone else had left, she closed the door to our shared office. Have you noticed how differently Douglas treats you compared to the guys? She asked, keeping her voice low despite the empty office. I thought maybe I was imagining it. I admitted, relief flooding through me that someone else saw it too. You are not. And it is not just you. He did the same thing to me yesterday when I proposed the new social media strategy. Then 20 minutes later, he practically applauded when Taylor suggested a watered-down version of the same thing. What should we do about it? I asked. Margaret shrugged, her expression troubled. Document everything for now, I suppose. Maybe he will improve once he gets to know us better. But improvement seemed unlikely as Douglas continued reshaping our department in his image. Team lunches disappeared, replaced by individuals eating hurriedly at their desks to meet new deadlines. The light-hearted banter that once filled our workspace faded into tense silence, punctuated only by the clicking of keyboards and occasional sighs of frustration. I missed Rachel's leadership more with each passing day. Whereas she had encouraged us to take creative risks, Douglas penalized any deviation from his prescribed methods. The joy was slowly being squeezed out of work I had once loved. Just give him time to adjust, Brian suggested when I confided my concerns. New leaders always want to make their mark. I nodded, trying to stay positive. But as I drove home that evening, a knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. Something told me this was more than just an adjustment period. Something told me the worst was yet to come. 3 months into Douglas's leadership, the subtle undermining escalated to something more blatant. During a presentation to our executive team about quarterly results, he presented my comprehensive market analysis as his own work. I sat stunned as he flipped through slides I had created, using my exact phrasing, but never acknowledging my contribution. Excellent research, Douglas, our chief financial officer commented. This gives us a much clearer picture of our position. Douglas nodded, accepting the praise without a glance in my direction. After the meeting, I approached him in the hallway, my heart pounding. I noticed you used my market analysis in the presentation, I said, keeping my voice level. I would appreciate attribution in the future. He looked at me with cold eyes. That was department work, not your personal project. As department head, I represent our collective output. He checked his watch. I have another meeting. We can discuss your need for personal recognition another time. Before I could respond, he walked away, leaving me standing alone with a mixture of anger and disbelief bubbling inside me. The Kinetic Flow campaign became the next battleground. Our company was launching this revolutionary workflow management system, and our marketing team was responsible for creating buzz around its release. I volunteered to lead the marketing strategy, seeing it as an opportunity to showcase my capabilities. For 2 weeks, I worked tirelessly, often staying until midnight, developing a multi-platform approach that targeted specific industry pain points. My proposal included innovative social media strategies, influencer partnerships, and interactive demonstrations that would allow potential customers to experience the product's benefits firsthand. When I submitted the completed strategy document to Douglas, he merely nodded and said he would review it. 3 days later, he called a department meeting to discuss the Kinetic Flow launch. Andrew will be taking point on this campaign, Douglas announced, sliding copies of a presentation across the table. To my horror, it was my strategy reformatted, but essentially unchanged, with Andrew's name listed as the creator. But that is my work, I blurted out, unable to contain myself. Douglas frowned. Andrew and I refined your initial concepts significantly. The final strategy reflects those improvements. I flipped through the document, finding no substantial changes beyond formatting and the occasional rewording. Andrew looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. After the meeting, I tried again to speak with Douglas privately. I put everything into that strategy, I said. All the research, the targeting plan, the content calendar. It was all me. You are being overly sensitive, Jeannie, he replied dismissively. This is business, not a school project where everyone gets a gold star. Andrew has the presentation skills this campaign needs. This is not about presentation skills, I insisted. This is about credit for my work. I think you need to examine why external validation is so important to you, he said, his tone condescending. It suggests a lack of professional maturity. I left his office feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. That night I barely slept, replaying his words and questioning whether I was indeed overreacting. But the next morning, Margaret confirmed what I already knew. That was completely inappropriate, she said when I confided in her. Your strategy was brilliant, and everyone knows you created it. The pattern continued with increasing frequency. I found myself excluded from important email chains regarding projects I had initiated. Meeting invitations for strategic planning sessions mysteriously failed to appear in my calendar. When I created content that received positive client feedback, Douglas would introduce it as team-generated, or sometimes as concepts he had guided the team to develop. My confidence began to erode. I second-guessed my ideas, rewrote emails multiple times before sending them, and hesitated to speak up in meetings. Sleep became elusive as I lay awake, wondering what I was doing wrong or how I could prove my worth. Physical symptoms followed the psychological strain. Tension headaches became regular visitors. My stomach churned with anxiety before each morning meeting. I lost weight as my appetite diminished, and dark circles took up permanent residence beneath my eyes. After particularly difficult interaction where Douglas interrupted my client presentation to clarify points I had already made perfectly clear, I decided to speak with someone in human resources. Patricia, the HR business partner assigned to our department, listened attentively as I described the pattern of behavior. This sounds frustrating, she acknowledged when I finished. But to be honest, Jeannie, these situations can be challenging to address without specific evidence of discrimination or harassment. So my word is not enough, I asked. It is not that simple, Patricia explained. We need to establish a clear pattern with documented incidents. Have you been keeping records of these occurrences? I had not, beyond vague calendar notations and some saved emails. Patricia suggested I start documenting everything: dates, times, witnesses, exact words spoken, and how the same situations were handled differently with other team members. She also recommended saving all relevant emails and communication. If there is truly a pattern here, documentation will help us address it appropriately, she assured me. That evening, I created a detailed spreadsheet with columns for each category Patricia had mentioned. I began reconstructing incidents from memory, then committed to recording new ones as they occurred. I created a separate email folder labeled Documentation and began saving relevant messages there. The process was therapeutic in a way. Instead of just feeling victimized, I was taking action. Still, I needed guidance from someone who understood the company culture, but wasn't directly involved in my current situation. I reached out to Rachel, scheduling a coffee meeting on a Saturday morning. I had heard rumors about Douglas from contacts at Vertex Systems, Rachel admitted after I explained my situation. His results were impressive, but there were whispers about his methods and how he treated certain team members, particularly women. Why would TechVision hire someone like that? I asked. Numbers talk, she said simply. His department delivered results, and sometimes leadership does not look beyond that. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. But that does not mean you have to accept mistreatment. Keep documenting everything, build a solid case, and when the time is right, present it clearly and unemotionally. Facts are harder to dismiss than feelings. I left our meeting feeling marginally better. At least I had a plan now: document, gather evidence, and prepare to make my case. What I did not know then was that the situation would reach a breaking point much sooner than I anticipated, and in a way that would test my resolve like never before. In early spring, TechVision landed an opportunity to pitch to Global Tech, an international corporation looking to overhaul their entire digital infrastructure. Securing this client would not only mean millions in revenue, but would also establish TechVision as a major player in enterprise-level solutions. The entire company buzzed with excitement and anxiety about the prospect. During a high-energy all-hands meeting, our CEO, Alexander, emphasized the importance of this potential partnership. This is the kind of opportunity that defines companies, he said, his usually calm demeanor replaced by visible enthusiasm. We need our absolute best work from every department. Following the meeting, Douglas called me into his office. I want you to lead the market analysis for the Global Tech proposal, he said, surprising me with this unexpected vote of confidence. I need demographic breakdowns, competitor positioning, value proposition alignment, the works. Can you handle that? Absolutely, I responded, perhaps too eagerly. Despite everything, I saw this as a chance to prove my value beyond doubt. Maybe success with this high-profile project would change how Douglas perceived me. I will need it in 2 weeks, he added. This takes priority over your other projects. For the next 14 days, I lived and breathed the Global Tech analysis. I canceled weekend plans, ordered takeout most nights, and routinely worked until my eyes burned from staring at the screen. I researched Global Tech's previous technology implementations, interviewed former employees, analyzed their public financial statements, and compiled comprehensive reports on their industry positioning. The resulting presentation was my finest work: 78 meticulously researched slides with actionable insights, clear visualizations, and strategic recommendations, tailored specifically to Global Tech's needs and future goals. I included detailed appendices supporting each conclusion and recommendation. 3 days before the executive presentation, I sent the completed analysis to Douglas for review, along with a note expressing my availability to make any necessary adjustments. I received no response that day nor the next. With 24 hours remaining before the big meeting, I sent a follow-up email asking for his feedback. Again, silence. The morning of the presentation arrived, and I still had not heard from Douglas. Assuming he had been too busy to respond, but had reviewed my work, I arrived at the conference room early, prepared to take notes during his presentation of my analysis. Douglas walked in surrounded by our executive team, looking confident in a crisp charcoal suit. He nodded briefly in my direction but made no effort to speak with me before the meeting began. As the room filled with directors and vice presidents, my anxiety grew. Why had he not discussed the presentation with me? Let us get started, CEO Alexander said once everyone was seated. Douglas, I understand you have a comprehensive market analysis for the Global Tech opportunity. I do, Douglas replied, standing and connecting his laptop to the projector. The first slide appeared on the screen, and my breath caught in my throat. It was not my presentation. Douglas had created an entirely new deck, but as he progressed through the slides, I recognized my data, my insights, and even some of my exact phrasing, all repackaged without any attribution. Heat rose to my face as I watched him present my 2 weeks of exhaustive work as his own. He used my competitive analysis framework, my demographic breakdowns, even my uniquely structured value proposition matrix, all without acknowledgement. This is impressive work, Douglas, our chief operating officer commented. The depth of analysis here gives us a significant advantage in our approach. I appreciate that, Douglas replied with a self-satisfied smile. I wanted to ensure we had a comprehensive understanding of the landscape before finalizing our strategy. I sat silently, my nails digging into my palms beneath the table. Every fiber of my being wanted to stand up and claim my work, but in a room full of executives, such an outburst would be career suicide. Instead, I took deep breaths and made detailed notes about every piece of my work that Douglas presented as his own. After the 90-minute meeting concluded with enthusiastic approval from the executive team, I waited until everyone else had filed out before approaching Douglas. That was my analysis, I said, quietly struggling to keep my voice steady. Every key insight in that presentation came from the work I sent you. Douglas gathered his papers unhurriedly. I used some of your data points as a starting point, yes, but the strategic framework and conclusions were mine. That is not true, I insisted, my voice rising slightly. The framework was exactly what I developed. The competitive positioning matrix was my original methodology. Even the language around value differentiation was taken verbatim from my slides. He straightened, looking down at me with cold eyes. This is how business works, Jeannie. Junior team members gather information and leadership shapes it into strategic insight. Your role was research support, and you performed that adequately. My role is to transform that into executive-level strategy, which I did. Junior team member, I echoed incredulously. I have been here for 4 years. I am a senior marketing specialist. A title that perhaps became inflated under previous leadership, he replied dismissively. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a follow-up meeting with Alexander to discuss next steps. As he walked away, I stood frozen in place, shock, gradually giving way to a simmering anger. For the rest of the day, I went through the motions of my job on autopilot, responding to emails and attending meetings while my mind processed what had happened. That evening, Margaret stopped by my desk as I was preparing to leave. I heard about the global tech presentation, she said softly. Brian told me what happened. You mean how Douglas stole my entire analysis and presented it as his own? The words came out more bitterly than I intended. Margaret nodded. It is not the first time he has done something like this. Last month, he used Taylor's design concept in the executive quarterly review without giving her credit. Why does everyone just accept this? I asked. Fear, she replied simply. Jobs are not easy to come by, especially ones that pay as well as Tech Vision. Most people decide it is easier to keep their heads down. I thought about Rachel's advice to document everything, which I had been doing diligently. My spreadsheet now contained 27 distinct incidents over the past 4 months, complete with dates, descriptions, and witnesses. The global tech presentation would become entry 28. As I drove home that night, something shifted inside me. The fear and self-doubt that had plagued me for months began to transform into resolve. If Douglas thought he could continue taking credit for others' work without consequence, he was mistaken. I just needed the right moment to act. I did not know then that the moment would arrive sooner than expected, or that it would unfold in a way I could never have anticipated. 2 weeks after the executive presentation, Global Tech signed a 3-year contract with Tech Vision worth $8.5 million. The announcement came with a company-wide email from CEO Alexander, specifically commending Douglas for his exceptional strategic insight and thorough market analysis that secured this landmark partnership. Adding insult to injury, the email mentioned a substantial performance bonus awarded to Douglas for his contribution to landing the account. The same day, a photo circulated of Alexander shaking hands with Douglas beside a giant check, both men beaming with accomplishment. Congratulations to us all on the Global Tech account, Douglas announced at our next team meeting, his voice dripping with false modesty. This team success demonstrates what we can achieve with proper leadership and strategic direction. I sat silently as he outlined the implementation timeline and our department's role in the transition. My documentation spreadsheet had grown to 33 incidents, each meticulously detailed and cross-referenced with supporting evidence. The folder of emails, screenshots, and other digital proof had expanded into subfolders organized by category and severity. As Douglas concluded his update and moved to the next agenda item, a strange calm settled over me. The fear that had kept me silent for months suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the injustice playing out before my eyes. Before we move on, I said, my voice stronger than I expected, I would like to discuss attribution for the global tech analysis. The room fell silent. Douglas looked up from his notes with narrowed eyes. We have a full agenda today, Jeannie. Personal concerns should be addressed in one-on-one meetings. This is not a personal concern, I continued, my heart pounding but my voice steady. This is about professional ethics and proper credit for work produced by team members. If you are referring to the market analysis presentation, Douglas said with a dismissive wave, as I have already explained, that was a leadership-level synthesis of departmental research. That is not accurate, I replied, opening my laptop. I have the original presentation I sent you 3 days before the executive meeting. 92% of the content in your presentation was identical to mine, including original frameworks I developed and language I crafted. Several colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Margaret caught my eye across the table, giving me a subtle nod of encouragement. This is an appropriate forum for this discussion, Douglas said, his voice taking on an edge. We will address your confusion privately. I am not confused, I stated firmly, and I believe this is exactly the right forum, since everyone in this room has experienced similar treatment at some point in the past 4 months. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Douglas's face darkened as he realized he was losing control of the narrative. The global tech analysis that secured our largest client this year was my work, I continued. The demographic segmentation, competitive positioning matrix, and value proposition framework were all methodologies I developed specifically for this project. I have the original files with metadata proving when they were created. That is enough. Douglas slammed his hand on the table. You are dangerously close to insubordination. Identifying plagiarism is not insubordination, I replied, maintaining eye contact. Taking credit for someone else's work, however, is unethical. Douglas stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I will not tolerate these baseless accusations, he hissed, his composure crumbling. You have contributed to company projects as part of your job requirements, nothing more. Then why does my original presentation contain the exact language frameworks and conclusions that you presented to leadership? I asked. Why did you not acknowledge my contribution at all? His face flushed red as he pointed a finger at me. I will not stand here and be accused by a subordinate who clearly doesn't understand how corporate hierarchy functions. I understand perfectly, I replied calmly. I just do not agree that hierarchy should be used to claim credit for others' work. I'll take legal action against you for defamation, he suddenly shouted, his voice echoing in the now deadly silent room. These accusations are damaging to my professional reputation and will not stand. 20 pairs of eyes darted between us. No one spoke. No one moved. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I smiled, a genuine smile born of relief rather than happiness. After months of anxiety and self-doubt, the truth was finally in the open. Please do, I said quietly. Douglas blinked clearly, not expecting this response. His momentary confusion quickly gave way to renewed anger. You are dismissed from this meeting, he spat, and consider yourself on notice. Human resources will be hearing about this insubordination, and I promise you will regret this unprofessional display. I gathered my laptop and notepad, calmly stood and walked to the door. Before exiting, I turned to face the room once more. I apologize for the disruption, I said to my colleagues, many of whom looked stunned by what they had witnessed. But sometimes the truth needs to be spoken aloud. As I closed the door behind me, my hands were shaking, but my mind was surprisingly clear. There was no going back now. Whatever happened next would determine not just my future at TechVision, but who I was as a professional and as a person. I returned to my desk, sat down, and took a deep breath. Then I opened my email and began to type. 21 minutes after leaving the meeting room, I had completed the most important email of my career. The subject line read simply, Formal Complaint Documentation of Workplace Misconduct. The body of the email was professional and factual, outlining the pattern of behavior I had documented over the previous 4 months. I detailed specific incidents with dates, descriptions, and names of witnesses, including the global tech analysis situation. I explained how Douglas had systematically taken credit for work done by team members, particularly female employees, and how he had created a hostile work environment through intimidation and threats. To this email, I attached multiple files, my original global tech presentation, with metadata showing creation dates, screenshots of Douglas's version, highlighting identical content emails, showing my submission of the work, and my full documentation spreadsheet with 33 distinct incidents. I also included statements from colleagues who had privately expressed willingness to corroborate my claims. I addressed the email to CEO, Alexander CFO Jonathan Patricia from Human Resources, and copied Douglas himself. In the final paragraph, I requested a formal investigation and meeting with leadership to discuss these concerns. In light of today's threat of legal action against me, I concluded I believe immediate intervention is necessary to address this pattern of professional misconduct and create a healthier work environment for all TechVision employees. My finger hovered over the send button for several seconds. Once I committed to this course of action, there would be no turning back. I might be saving my career or ending it. Taking a deep breath, I clicked send. Within minutes, my email notification chimed. Douglas had responded, but only to me, not to the other recipients. This ill-advised action will have serious consequences for your career, his message read. Be prepared for a formal response to your defamatory claims. I strongly suggest you retract your email and issue an apology immediately. I did not respond. Instead, I saved his email to my documentation folder and continued with my regular work as best I could, though concentration proved nearly impossible. By the end of the day, I had received no further communication from Douglas or anyone in leadership. I left the office feeling like I was walking on eggshells, uncertain what the next day would bring. That evening was one of the longest of my life. I alternated between confidence in my decision and waves of anxiety about potential fallout. What if they sided with Douglas? What if I lost my job? What if he actually followed through with a lawsuit? I barely slept, rehearsing potential scenarios and responses in my head throughout the night. The following day brought uncomfortable silence. Douglas did not appear in the office, and no one mentioned the previous day's confrontation, though curious glances followed me throughout the day. By afternoon, rumors circulated that Douglas was working remotely, but no official communication addressed his absence or my complaint. Another day passed in the same unsettling limbo. Then, at 4:30 on the third day after sending my email, I received a calendar invitation from Alexander's executive assistant for a meeting the following morning in the CEO's office. The attendee list included Alexander Jonathan Stephanie, from Human Resources Leadership, and me. Douglas's name was notably absent. That night I prepared meticulously for the meeting, organizing my thoughts and reviewing my documentation. I selected a conservative navy pantsuit that made me feel professional and confident, and forced myself to eat a proper dinner despite my churning stomach. Whatever happened the next day would set the course for my future, and I was determined to face it with dignity. The next morning I arrived 15 minutes early for the 9 o'clock meeting, only to be told by Alexander's assistant that they were running slightly behind schedule. I sat in the waiting area outside his office, watching the minutes tick by on my watch, and trying to control my racing heart. At 9:20 the door opened and Stephanie emerged to escort me inside. The CEO's office was larger than I expected, with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city. Alexander sat behind an imposing desk, while Jonathan and Stephanie took seats at a small conference table to one side. "Jeannie, thank you for joining us," Alexander said, gesturing to an empty chair at the table. His tone was neutral, giving no indication of which way the wind was blowing. Once I was seated, Alexander folded his hands on the table. "We have spent the past 2 days reviewing your complaint and conducting preliminary interviews with team members." He paused, studying my face. "I want you to know that we take allegations of this nature extremely seriously." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. "The evidence you provided was thorough," Jonathan added, tapping a tablet in front of him, particularly regarding the Global Tech presentation. "We have also spoken with 8 of your colleagues," Stephanie said. "Their accounts largely corroborate the pattern you described." Alexander leaned forward. "Jeannie, I owe you an apology on behalf of TechVision. We failed in our responsibility to maintain a workplace where all contributions are recognized and all employees are treated with respect." Relief washed over me so powerfully that I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. They believed me. "The situation with Douglas represents a significant oversight in our hiring and management processes," Alexander continued. "While his previous results were impressive, we now understand they may have been achieved through methods inconsistent with our company values." "Where is Douglas now?" I asked, finding my voice. "He has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation," Stephanie replied. "He was informed yesterday afternoon." And his legal threats I could not help asking. Jonathan smiled slightly. Our legal counsel has advised Douglas that any defamation claim would be extraordinarily difficult to pursue given the evidence at hand. In fact, such action would likely expose him to counterclaims. We want to assure you that your position here is secure, Alexander added. More than that, we want to properly recognize your contribution to the global tech account. What happens next? I asked. The investigation will continue, Stephanie explained. We need to determine the full extent of the situation and whether other team members were similarly affected. Douglas will remain on leave during this process with no contact with the team. Alexander leaned back in his chair. In the meantime, we would like you to lead the marketing implementation for the global tech onboarding. Given your intimate knowledge of the client and strategy, you are clearly the best person for the role. I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders with each passing moment. I would be happy to take that on. I replied, a small smile forming. I have some additional ideas that were not included in the original analysis. I look forward to hearing them, Alexander said, returning my smile. And Jeannie, thank you for your courage in bringing this to our attention. It could not have been easy. As the meeting concluded and I stood to leave, Jonathan stepped forward to shake my hand. The truth always finds its way to the surface, eventually, he said quietly. But it certainly helps when someone has the courage to speak it. Walking back to my desk after the meeting, I felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. The burden I had carried for months had been acknowledged and lifted. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them, knowing I had stood up for myself and for what was right. In the week following my meeting with executive leadership, TechVision underwent a transformation that rippled through every department. Douglas quietly departed the company without returning to the office. The official announcement cited personal reasons for his exit, but the absence of the customary farewell email and good wishes spoke volumes. Patricia from Human Resources personally informed me that Douglas would not be pursuing any legal action against me or the company. Apparently, when confronted with the mountain of evidence I had compiled, he had chosen to accept a separation agreement that included a non-disparagement clause. The executive team made good on their promise to recognize my contribution to the global tech account. At the next company meeting, Alexander publicly acknowledged my role in developing the strategic analysis that secured the partnership. Even more meaningful was the performance bonus check that arrived with my next paycheck, accompanied by a handwritten note from Alexander expressing the company's appreciation. Beyond the personal vindication, my stand triggered broader changes within TechVision. Stephanie led an initiative to revise the company's performance evaluation process, implementing a more transparent system that tracked contributions to projects and ensured proper attribution. A comprehensive anti-discrimination policy was developed with specific protocols for reporting concerns, and mandatory training sessions were scheduled for all management personnel. 3 weeks after Douglas's departure, Alexander called me into his office for an unexpected meeting. We have been re-evaluating our marketing department structure, he explained, and would like to offer you the position of Senior Marketing Director. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, expanded responsibilities, and a team of 8 direct reports. Your analytical skills and strategic thinking have proven invaluable, Alexander continued. But equally important is your integrity and commitment to fostering a collaborative environment. Taking on the leadership role felt both exciting and daunting. My first action was to reinstate the team lunches that Douglas had eliminated, using that time to listen to each team member's ideas and concerns. I made sure to publicly acknowledge individual contributions in meetings and established a rotation system for presenting to executive leadership, ensuring everyone had opportunities for visibility. My relationship with upper management evolved as well. Where once I had been just another face in department meetings, I now had a seat at the strategy table. Jonathan sought my input on financial projections, and Alexander regularly stopped by my office to discuss new market opportunities. The respect I received was not just personal validation, but confirmation that ethical leadership could indeed be recognized and rewarded. The healing process was not instantaneous, however. For weeks after the confrontation, I struggled with lingering anxiety and self-doubt. Nightmares about Douglas returning to the office or following through on his legal threats occasionally disrupted my sleep. Simple triggers like receiving an unexpected meeting invitation could send my heart racing with momentary panic. Recognizing these symptoms as potential signs of workplace trauma, I took advantage of the company's employee assistance program to speak with a therapist. Those sessions helped me process the emotional impact of the months spent under Douglas's leadership and develop healthier responses to stress triggers. Gradually, my confidence rebuilt. Each successful project under my direction, each positive client interaction, each team milestone reinforced my capabilities and right to professional respect. The joy I had once found in my work slowly returned, brightened by the knowledge that I was now creating the supportive environment I had so valued during Rachel's leadership. New relationships formed as well. Margaret became not just a colleague, but a trusted friend and advisor in my new role. Brian stepped up as an informal technical mentor, helping me navigate the more complex analytics aspects of our campaigns. Even Taylor, who had been the quietest during the Douglas era, blossomed under the revitalized department culture, producing some of his most innovative designs. 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, Rachel visited the office during a business trip. Over dinner that evening, I recounted the full story. "I kept thinking about what you told me," I explained, "about documenting everything and presenting facts rather than emotions. That advice made all the difference." Rachel smiled. "The advice helped, but your courage made the difference. Many people document injustice, but few are willing to risk everything to address it." Her words highlighted the most profound lesson I had learned through this experience. Standing up for yourself does not require aggression or dramatics, merely persistence and preparation. The truth, when properly documented and calmly presented, has a power that intimidation cannot match. The incident with Douglas had transformed not just my career trajectory, but my understanding of professional ethics and personal boundaries. I learned that protecting your work and dignity is not selfishness, but self-respect. I discovered that fear, while natural, should not be the deciding factor in whether to address injustice. Most importantly, I realized that integrity, even when challenging to maintain, ultimately serves you better than silent compliance ever could. Looking back, the moment Douglas threatened legal action against me was indeed his biggest mistake, but not for the reasons he might think. His threat did not intimidate me into silence as intended. Instead, it catalyzed the very reckoning he had worked so hard to avoid. In trying to maintain his facade of competence through intimidation, he revealed the emptiness behind it. Today, as I mentor younger team members navigating their own career challenges, I share this wisdom: document everything, know your worth, and recognize that sometimes the threats that seem most frightening are actually opportunities in disguise. The path of integrity may not always be the easiest, but it leads to destinations worth reaching. Sometimes the legal action someone threatens can become the gift they never intended to give you if you have the courage to accept it. Have you ever stood up for yourself in a difficult workplace situation? Share your experience in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need this message today. Remember, your voice matters, and your work deserves recognition. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to navigate your own workplace challenges with integrity and confidence.